Pioneer Knowledge Services welcomes you to the next Because You Need to Know. I'm your host, Edwin K. Morris. I serve as president and founder of this organization, and we are thrilled to offer this educational program. These design conversations bring you people's experiences from all over the globe in the field of knowledge management, nonprofit work, and innovation.
Thank you for listening to Because You Need to Know, the reference podcast in knowledge management. My name is Soni Toneme. As an art administrator, Because You Need to Know has been my go-to podcast and has helped me hone my management skills. Please consider sponsoring the podcast with your business.
My name is Sven Rinke. I live in Vienna, Austria. I'm currently working at SimCorp, which is a Danish software and services provider for investment management solutions. And in the company, I work as Director of Knowledge Management and Learning Strategy in Client Services. The last book I read was The Birth of String Theory. And that was important to me because it took me back to my days when I was getting my PhD, learning about string theory in graduate school. And it connects to knowledge management in the sense that it talks about from the pioneers of string theory, from their point of view, how they got into the field, how they interacted with one another, how they made connections and built their expertise by not just doing research, but also conversing with one another, working with one another in a pioneer field. Maybe the absolute best advice that I've received was to be in the moment always. And that was from my wife. I just had a session with my mentor, Stan Garfield. He was my mentor for the last 6 months or so as part of a mentoring program that was advocated through the SIAKM community. He was actually the person from afar, from listening to podcasts, from reading his blogs, who educated me and got me to think about how to implement knowledge management practices within my organization. Or take the first baby steps, let's say.
Well, I think probably most of the listeners have had some kind of interface or some association with a conference in some form or fashion in their lives. What your organization is doing is being able to create a activity within the framework of the organization to build cultural strength. Can you give us some details how that works?
Sure. A few years ago, in 2018, we underwent some transformation within the organization. And we had the need to share knowledge about that transformation and new ways of working. And what we started doing is so-called virtual conferences that started really small within a department, where it was on a monthly cadence, 3-4 sessions where individuals shared what they had learned, their good practice. Something that they'd done either with clients or with our product or with our services. And that grew from 2018 with few participants per sessions, maybe in the first year on average 20 participants, to now monthly sessions that per session have on average 150 participants. We have in a company that has 2,500 people working there, over 1,800 people subscribe to receive the invitations, roughly 1,000 people per month dialing into these sessions to learn purely internally what others have done, what we have learned, what we are doing. It creates a sense of belonging to the organization. It helps with the sense making. What are we doing as an organization? To whose benefit? What is the person maybe not next to me doing? Because I know what I'm doing and I know what the person next to me is doing. But what's the person doing afar? What are we doing in the Philippines or in Mexico versus me being in Vienna?
I get what you're doing. You're shortcutting people in a sense to be able to communicate and network and see each other and hear each other and build relationship. But is it formal? Is it just, oh, here's the mic, it's open mic night kind of thing? Or is there a formula you follow?
There's a formula we follow, and the formula is that it is meant to be informal. So it's not meant to be something that takes a long time to prepare. it should be something that you're intimately familiar with because you're doing it or you have been doing it. It is a formula in the sense that it's 30-minute sessions, not longer. It's 20 to 25 minutes. Give a presentation or talk about a topic that you are familiar with, you're interested in, and you want to share. And then it's time for Q&A. And the purpose of it is to get other people familiar with what you're doing, maybe connect with you afterwards because somebody who dialed in finds out, oh, that person is doing something that is important for what I'm doing, or maybe has done something that I'm about to do. Now I don't have to do it, reinvent the wheel, do it from scratch, but reuse the expertise or the work that has been finished by that other person.
Well, tell me this, is the majority of your interaction of your of your people, is the majority of the interaction on the live, or are you seeing a lot of stuff where people are going back to the recording or any other productions you get from that one-time event?
Actually, it's a great point because the big benefit is, of course, the synchronous interaction that people can have. So I dial in to a session and can ask a question, get an answer, and so on. But we also see that we started out creating this repository of recordings and presentations from the start. It has grown to be a repository of over 300 recordings and presentations. One of the best things I heard the other day was from a colleague of mine who said, this has become my knowledge base.
Wow.
If I want to learn about something, I go here. And I see that there's a lot of people visiting, like between 50 and 150 unique visitors to the repository on SharePoint a day.
Yeah, they're accessing it.
People go to it to look at it, to reuse the material, and we made it really easy to access it.
Yeah.
And we used low tech, we use Excel, believe it or not, as an embedded way of having all the information regarding what was the topic,
oh, interesting,
what was the content, who was the speaker. It's also meant for expertise location. So I want to learn about a topic. Not only do I have the recording or the presentation, I also know who spoke about it, who I may be able to contact about it. So at multiple purposes, that's also what creates a lot of value.
Is this a whole shake and bake something you guys came up with? I mean, did you just
No, actually, somebody else came up with it. But so I don't want to take all the credit. And we had a knowledge management director before in 2018, but he left the company. I found it quite valuable. So I took it on me as not as part of my job, but sort of as part of my hobby.
Got it.
So in addition to my regular job, I curated this entire virtual conference setup. And based on the feedback that I received or we received for doing this, the positive feedback, we augmented what we were doing. We expanded the audience because suddenly it was like, oh, I heard you're doing these sessions for your department. Yeah. I think these topics are also relevant for us. Can we participate? And my boss said, hey, why don't you invite the salespeople? Why don't you invite the product people? And so on. And I said, well, I'll happily extend the audience in the sense that I let them know that here is where you can sign up, but I'm not going to conscript anybody.
Yeah.
It's purely voluntary. One thing that I was and am vehemently against is to say, oh, sign up all the new joiners to the mailing list to get the invites automatically. No, people have to voluntarily sign up. It should not be something that is forced upon them or that makes them feel it's forced upon them. Both the signing up to the sessions as well as the participation in the sessions, purely voluntary.
Was that a difficult decision? I mean, who had that decision? Because I've heard it go both ways. Everybody will play, you will participate, you will engage.
So I've felt quite a level of ownership over the concept. And it's been mainly my decision what we do and how we do it. I've taken the feedback into account and the input that I've received over the years from the people both participating and giving advice and so on. But I try to actually take what I've learned from all the podcasts and the blogs I read and hear about what works with people and so on, taking the people aspect into account.
So you've created a social media. This is a social media connector.
Essentially.
Yeah, with a purpose. I mean, versus social media, which has various purposes, but this is a designed approach that is not mandatory, that people are coming to the well and hearing third-party comments, and they're like, what? What's this stuff? And you don't even have to sell it.
No, I don't have to sell it. People flock to it, I would say. And, new joiners hear about it from their buddies or from other people. Hey, this thing, and you can learn about different topics. If you want to learn more about that, go back there and, have a look at the repository. And it's just a great way for sharing knowledge.
Is it unusual, do you think, in that your culture's prime for a learning culture anyway? Is that why you don't have to sell it?
So curiosity or being curious is part of our values. And so is collaborative, courageous, and caring. And the last one, not least one, is customer success driven. But in particular, being curious, being collaborative, being courageous, and being caring, that's all aspects to me of knowledge management and knowledge sharing.
Absolutely.
And customer success driven as well, in the sense that we are here for a purpose. We're not here for the purpose, or as my CEO, when I was hired, said, who pays your salary? It's not your company. It's not SimCorp. It's the clients. It's the customers.
Customer. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I pulled up from your website under its Who We Are section.
Yes.
They state creating a workplace that offers meaning and growth opportunities. It sounds to me this is just not fluff. It sounds to me this is a bona fide. Your culture operates in this mindset.
Yes. So growth is one of our mantras, I would say. Individual growth, individual learning. As I said, being curious and developing yourself in your practice, what you do every day, but also learn about what others are doing or why you're doing it, right? Who benefits from it in terms of our clients. And clients can also be internal for internally facing functions, right? Not just for our consultants or product people or sales people who interact maybe with clients on a regular basis. But also internally, I see a lot of people from HR, people and culture, as we call it now, or finance, who don't interact with our clients, who are service functions within the organizations, who are still curious and want to learn more what we do as an organizations and what are the different parts of the organizations are doing. And the virtual conference setup is a good vehicle for them to learn about that in a very low level way. It's not a training that you have to attend.
In some frameworks in knowledge flow, we talk about pull and push. So in a corporate structure, there's the normal flow of push. Push it out, push it out, push it out. The pull has more value because those people, like you said, are inquisitive. They want to learn things. They don't know, so they're going to go find out. Not everybody's built that way.
No.
So I have to ask, how do you hire that way?
Well, so
what's the big secret? What is there one question you always ask and that's how you know?
No, so I've hired a few people in my tenure at SimCorp, and I wouldn't say I have one question or a secret thing that's find out. You just have to get a feel of, are these people who can go out on a limb, who want to learn, who are curious. So we hire for culture, I would say, as well. Everybody's different, right? And everybody's way of learning or way of interacting is slightly different. So there's not one way that you can say, if you check this tick box, then you're the one for us.
Then you're. That's always a good question, because I think the hiring part for the type of characteristics which make a good knowledge sharer, knowledge developer, which is integral to a good knowledge culture. You're right. There's no way you can just, here's a Rubik's Cube. If you can solve this Rubik's Cube in 35 seconds, you're in. Until we do, maybe that's a DNA check. I don't know. Maybe someday we'll have them all pulled together and it'll be a perfect world.
Maybe one aspect that we consider in selecting candidates is their educational background. And that can give you an indication. It's not necessarily always the case that you can tell from people's past educational background whether they are active learners. As you know, some people go to grade schools, get good grades, but they're not necessarily people that you want to hire and so on, who are curious, who are courageous, who are collaborative. right?
Yeah.
You have to get a feel for that in interviews, but it's an indication.
Education is the one thing you look at.
Yeah, education is one thing. We look at sort of past work history, but we also hire out of school and so on. And then, questions we ask is, tell me about the situation where you were the best version of yourself. Like, where did you learn? How did you learn?
Awesome.
When did you learn something about yourself?
I'd be like, How much time do you have? Well, those are good prying questions that kind of get down to that underlayment of what a person's like. So let's move on. So I'm curious, does your role or your organization, you're putting all this strength and energy into building a strong culture. What are you measuring? Because everybody likes to have a dashboard. We want to see where we're at. How do you measure culture?
You can't really measure culture, right? Culture is, the way I see it, more an emergent property of the interactions of people. Some people say culture drives performance. Sure. And you can measure performance, but you can also have a bad culture create good performance. And so you cannot say from this is a well-performing organization that it has a great culture. A great culture can enable that, but it's not a given. And so measuring culture, I feel like, is very difficult. But something like what we have with these virtual knowledge sharing sessions and the participation, that people are curious, that people help each other, that they are open to helping one another, collaborating with one another, care about one another. I think that's indications, but it's not really that well measurable.
What would be the biggest pulse check? If you had to tell somebody, man, this is the one thing you want to look for, and feeling that out, where do you go for the actual pulse of? And I know what you're saying. Culture is not equal to performance, but
so we do, of course, like the regular pulse surveys or employee surveys, right? But they tell you only so much, I would say.
Okay.
They give an indication of how people feel within the organization. And then there are some targeted questions regarding, I mentioned our values, right? Curious, collaborative, courageous, caring, customer success driven. How well are we doing with regards to those? But there's not one question, I would say, that weeds this out.
Okay.
It's a bit like trying to mesh that all together, all the information that you get, and then having one number out of it that says, oh, this is great or this is not great, and comparing. I'm not a big fan of that, I have to say.
I keep steering the conversation towards this because of your background. I would think for a scientist such as yourself, you'd have figured out some kind of formula by now that would make this much easier.
So I've come a long way since my days of being a physicist and looking at the fundamental theories that hold our world together in a very reductionist way. I've come maybe a bit around seeing the world as a bit more emergent and complex, and that you can't reduce everything to a formula or a number and so on.
I can't believe you just said that. Oh my gosh. Aren't you going to get punished or something?
Nope, I'm not. What I really value when I see it is, and try to model also in my behavior, is the interpersonal interaction. One thing that probably familiar with, you can be efficient with things, but you have to be effective with people. And being effective with people and people-to-people interactions, that's typically not efficient. And trying to be efficient in that is very detrimental to the interpersonal relationship. And so I have employees. I used to have more employees when I was in a different role. I always try to make time for them. Now, when people approach me with topics, hey, do you have a minute to talk about this? It's something that I'm always make time for.
In the military, we would call that an open door policy. It's like, hey, you want to sit down and chat? Let's go. It's a very, there's a level of transparency, and I think that gives a level of trust automatically if people know you're approachable.
And believable, right? And
authentic and all that.
Authentic, how you behave, and your actions are in line with your words and so on. So
your bit about the theory and having a perfect formula, it reminds me of an old joke. So the guy goes to get a job, and the employer's reading the CV or his business information, and he says, oh, it says here you're very quick at arithmetic. Oh, yeah. So he says 24 minus 6 times 3. He said 472. He said, that's not even close. Well, I didn't say I was correct, but I'm fast.
Yep.
But it wasn't right. I get what you're saying, going after, and I know a lot of organizations love to have dashboards. Leaders like to see red, yellow, or green and understand all the big things and simple ways to consume that. And it's not always easy. So it almost sounds like you don't have to have any provability in your success as much, because your organization in its commitment to being itself is already like halfway to a knowledge management ecosystem anyway.
I wouldn't say we don't have any KPIs as an organization, right?
Oh, okay.
Of course, there's also, the hard measures and so on. In what I'm doing, I do some kind of metrics with, for instance, virtual knowledge sharing sessions, and they should also contribute to our organizational capabilities or the competencies that we have within the organization, that people learn, that we measure learning in a sense, right? Or people's expertise development in that sense. And for the virtual conference sessions, for instance, I publish once a year in the beginning of the year, sort of how many sessions did we have? What were the learning hours delivered?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, that was triggered by our DEI lead asking me, hey, do you have these statistics so we can put it in our sustainability report? I said, I don't, but I can probably generate them.
I can do that. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's a good idea. Everybody likes to have a tally.
Yeah, and it just also shows a bit of the value that it brings to an organization. If we say we value that people spend time learning, right? And we want to measure these learning hours, even if it is not real learning in the sense, or if it's not training, let's put it that way. If it's not intentional, if it's not in some sense guided learning in terms of training, but if it's voluntary learning in terms of I learned something about something that I'm interested in, which is, the voluntary learning is the more effective one anyway.
Exactly.
And maybe the other metric that we use for the sessions, we started with that quite early on, is an exit poll. So sort of how valuable did you find a session, or almost like an NPS score, would you recommend this to a friend or colleague? How much value did you get out of it, or what was the value that was its time spent in a valuable way? And then it's a rating from 1 to 5. And I've started sending your rating was so-and-so for your sessions to the presenters, until somebody asked me, well, how do I fit into the quartiles? Or, how do I compare? Because that's what people are also interested in. Then I started calculating the quartiles and sent that, to all the presenters. And recently, somebody who had given a session contacted me saying, "Oh, I didn't know you had these statistics available. Now I want to do another session to get better
score.
To be better, right?" And that's just, you may laugh about this, but most people maybe, they like these kind of things, that they, have something to compete against or compare, right? And also want to get better, right? And sometimes I get a question, so what could I have done better? And that gives then me an opportunity to say, hey, this could have been better. You could have told a better story. I give them some preparation beforehand, saying, you can practice using the virtual speaker coach in PowerPoint. You can tell a story using a certain model and so on, the A model, audience, intent, message.
Rehearsing is very helpful.
It can be helpful.
Not only is it a knowledge development, creation, sharing, curation, it is a professional development tool.
Yes. And I tell people, who say, oh, I don't know if my topic or if I can talk about something in that large audience, because it is a large audience, right? You're talking to 100, 150. The largest audience I think we had was when somebody talked about generative AI, and we had almost 400 people dialing in. That is a large audience. That's a large part of the organization that you're speaking to, right? And that can put pressure on people, but this is a way for you to also practice public speaking.
Well, speaking of speaking.
In a safe environment, yes.
Well, yeah, safe environment, that's a big plus. Not everybody gets that opportunity.
Exactly.
That's why it is a good learning opportunity. It really is a good learning opportunity. So define for the listeners what you define knowledge management as.
Well, With that, I want to start with what knowledge is, right? So, and I actually like the ISO definition in that knowledge is a human organizational asset that enables effective decisions and action in context. And this in context is very important.
It is. In context gives an impression that it's temporal. There's a time relationship here.
Yes, and also it's in relation to something, right? It can be people, it can be things. Like, where do I apply it? It has to be applicable to something.
Yeah, you're not going to tell everybody how you make the best cookies and have that somehow be valuable to the organization unless you're making cookies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got you.
And then knowledge management is sort of how do you create an environment, create the conditions so that that knowledge, that asset, be it human or organizational, can be developed, can be used, can be put to good use so that it enables a better organizational performance. And then the entire life cycle of knowledge assets, talk about explicit knowledge. Dave Snowden likes to talk about knowledge being both a thing and a flow. How do you also enable the flow of embodied knowledge? Not everything can or should be written down or put into explicit form, but how do you connect people so that you enable people to develop expertise, not just by doing things themselves, making mistakes. I always like to say you learn best by making mistakes, by doing things and making mistakes. Can be a very hard way to learn, can be an expensive way to learn. And the second best way is to learn from the mistakes of others. And that's why connecting people, providing mentoring opportunities or social learning and collaboration spaces where people can learn from each other and also learn from the mistakes the more maybe expert person has made, who hopefully feels safe enough to talk about how they screwed up at some point in time and what mayhem that may have created, but what they've learned from it and now also willing to share with others so that they don't make the same mistake. To me, that's almost a more important way than just doing the explicit knowledge management.
Everything you just described set an environment in my mind is totally action-oriented. There is a endeavor to create actionable knowledge that's useful, valuable, and relative, not just to create content to create content. So there's ownership, and I think you used that early on, the concept of, you're talking about your position, that you own this, you're kind of run the shop.
Yeah.
There is a ability that comes when given ownership or agency to run something or to deliver something.
It's like Dan Pink Motivation 2.0, right? Motivation is autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Who is that?
Dan Pink. He wrote a book where he talks about that. And this autonomy piece, that I feel agency over what I'm doing. The mastery, I feel fairly confident in what I'm doing. And I develop my practice. I develop my mastery. And then the purpose, it's not just I'm not doing something for the sake of it, but it fits into a broader perspective. Also, the sense of belong to an organization who provides some value for another organization, clients, or the greater good can also feed into that purpose element.
Well, it kind of goes back to an old saying that it's something like, if you love what you do, then it's not work.
Exactly. Actually, sometimes I've been asked, if you would win the lottery and you wouldn't have to work anymore, would you still do what you're doing? And I said, yes, I love it because I learn also from the interactions that I have with people. It's a constant learning cycle for me. And as long as I live, I hopefully will continue to have this drive to learn.
It's almost like you're operating a schoolhouse in some degree because you're in that flow, you're in the mix. And I hear what you're saying, because that's what I love about what I do, because it's a constant exchange. It's a constant creation of new knowledge just through conversation and or new things coming. And it makes a very engaging and thriving community.
Yeah, and you are able to connect people with people.
All comes down to the people. So I'm going to have to say that out of the three legs of the KM stool, people, process, and technology, you're pretty much a people all people? People.
I would say so. There's process technology. I'm also a bit of governance, I would say. I'm big on, well, there needs to be a structure that puts people first, but there also, if you leave things alone, as a physicist, I know entropy rises and, we'll have heat death or chaos at the end of the day. So there needs to be some structure and some energy put into providing that structure. But once that, and that's also what people look for, right? But it doesn't have to be expensive to provide that.
Simple's a good way to go, but
simple is better. Simple is
better. I agree.
It's a KISS principle, right?
But it's also something, it seems, in organizations where it doesn't fly much. Everything's another certain amount of money out the door for whatever the next thing is.
Yeah, it's so easy to fall into that trap to try to lead with technology and think that technology will solve your problems when it's really people who need to make things happen and a certain structure provided and so on.
I think people have a longer shelf life than most software or hardware. That's my guess.
Yeah, probably.
Some people, if you think about it, I was just talking to somebody on a ride this morning about when I went to undergrad, I had to take computer language called DOS and write programs and all that stuff. The circle of the wheel for technology is such a fast wheel that, did it help me? I don't know. It was a requirement, so I had to take it. The exposure to it just showed that I don't need to be doing that for a living. But, what's changed so fast in technology, it's hard to pick what target you want to shoot at today, and that's kind of leading us right into this next question, which is ChatGPT, generative AI. How does that new technology evolution help you in what you do to keep it simple?
Yeah, so the biggest issue in organizing sessions is always coming up with a title, coming up with a description. And it's not the biggest issue for me, but it's the biggest issue for the person who is tasked with presenting. At some point, I gave up in asking people, hey, give me a description, give me a title. I said, hey, based on what I know, here's a proposed title, here's a proposed description. Here's what I want you to talk about, right? But I'm not a creative writer person. It always took me a while to come up with a good title, or maybe it wasn't even a good title and a good description. But I used a certain formula, have a sort of catchy descriptive title, and then in the description have an introduction sentence, and then the second sentence starting with join this virtual knowledge sharing session to ... and the ... being then something, a more descriptive version of an agenda. And when ChatGPT came along, I tried it out. Hey, based on some bullet points, maybe some background information, can you propose me a title, a catchy title, and a description that matches this pattern? And boom. And if I say, well, I don't really like, please write again, it's seamless. And that's been really making my life easier and coming up with titles and descriptions. And definitely the presenter's life has always been easy when I wrote it, but it's even better now in terms of the writing and description. Typically, there's not much that people want to correct in it. They say, great, wonderful.
Well, you've simplified the process because, as you said, you kept waiting for them to supply it, and people are people.
And it's not their main job, right? I need to make it easy for them. And that's one way of making it easy for them so that they essentially only have to show up. Ideally, have a bit of practice before. To me, it's been really a great tool to draft something that then I can work with.
Well, it's that first version, right? It's like, how do you write a book? You sit down, you start on page 1. And that just, there's a mental block, I think, for a lot of folks. They're like, oh, geez.
The blank sheet of paper, we had to start.
But it's always easier to edit somebody else's stuff.
Yep.
It's like, oh, sure that's right? And it simplifies, going back to the KISS. It keeps you focused on the product and not the process.
Yeah, exactly.
Any last words of wisdom? Oh, great Sven.
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of Harold Sharkey's personal knowledge mastery framework, Seek, Sense, Share. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I'm not.
I like to, through podcasts, through articles, through material that I see or conferences, seek information and knowledge, sense it, try to make sense of it. How does it relate to me? What do I learn from it? And then share back to an audience. I post on LinkedIn every now and then also about podcasts. I've posted about your podcasts in the past.
You have.
And for me, that's just a way also for me to process the knowledge and share it then with a wider audience in the hopes that somebody else can benefit from it. And I'm always happy to interact with people, or when people comment on stuff that I post, to have a dialogue with them. Sometimes it becomes more of a friendship or relationship, or I invite them to give a talk within our organization. So some of the sessions that I organize are also with people external to the organization. And that's also a great way to educate the organization or get some exposure within a different organization if somebody's interested in that.
That's pretty open-minded thinking you have there.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining this extraordinary journey, and we hope the experiences gained add value to you and yours. See you next time at Because You Need to Know. If you'd like to contact us, please email byntk@pioneer-ks.org or find us on LinkedIn. If your company or organization would like to help us continue this mission and sponsor one of our shows, email byntk@pioneer-ks.org.